What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. But before you get all into the topic today, I would love it if you did a few things. Hit the like button, share button, subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. And then when you're finished watching this video, leave me a comment below and I'll get back to your comment. For today's topic, I want to do a full review on the second Joker movie. So let's get into it. So for those of you all who don't know, the movie Joker, Folie, Deux recently came out. And this is the second movie in the Joker movie series by Warner Brothers. And this is a movie that I have been anticipating for a good minute because I watched the first Joker movie and I thought it was really good. And that movie came out back in 2019. So this is now 5 years later that we're now seeing the second adaptation to this series. Now, my wife the other day said something to the effect of she was surprised that I really wanted to go see this movie because I hadn't been talking about it in recent. And I told her, well, one of the reasons why I haven't been talking about it in recent is because I didn't realize that it actually was going to be coming out this month. And that's partially, in my opinion, because they really didn't promote this movie very well. You know, they had a preview and all this other stuff, but you didn't really see them constantly talking about this movie. Or I'll just say it like this. I didn't really see that. I saw it talked about maybe a few times. I saw that there was a little preview for it, but the promotion for it to me just wasn't really done very well. Regardless, I went to go see it. I wanted to review it and I wanted to get my own thoughts because a lot of people were already feeding to me that this movie sucked. This movie was terrible. This movie was awful. So I'm like, let me go check it out. Let me go see it myself and I'll report back to y'all what my thoughts are. So I want to tell you all about what happened when we first walked in the movie theater like I always do. So when we first walked in, it was super empty. And my wife and I were like, oh my God, there's all these seats. Let's pick a seat. We got to have a seat somewhere. And then when we got in there, it became a circus, y'all. So let me tell you about this. Let me tell you. So people started filing in and we had a whole bunch of people. There was this one person who was literally like walking all around the damn movie theater. And I kind of like I was kind of like looking back and forth for a little bit because I'm sitting there like, I hope they don't do nothing crazy. Now they not trying to be like the damn Joker in the fucking movie. Because like I had to kind of look around a little bit like why is this person like walking back and forth? They were walking through a set they were walking up the stairs, you know, to get to a different seat, and they were walking through the aisle, then they walked back down. I'm like, are they doing laps or some shit? Why are they trying to practice for a damn track meet up in the movie theater? So that was going on. Then there was this one person who was snoring loud as hell in the back. So they clearly thought this movie was boring as hell. Then somebody else in the opposite corner was pointing the shit out. And then you had like this kid who was basically coughing every millisecond. So it was a lot of shit going on, y'all. Shoot, I really think that at the end of the day, like what was going on in the movie theater was almost more entertaining than what was going on screen. But I don't know, y'all. Yeah, and people was leaving the movie theater all early. You had it was like 4 or 5 people who done walked out the movie theater before the movie even ended. So I was like, dang, they really didn't like this. So before I get into all my thoughts when it comes to this movie, I just want to say the general consensus for me was that this movie was not as bad as people were saying, but it still wasn't good. So let me elaborate on what I mean by that, because I want to be very specific and intentional on what I mean while I'm reviewing this movie. The reason why I think a lot of people did not like this movie, at least from my perspective, was because of the fact that they have a certain way that they were picturing this movie to be in general. Because when you hear about the Joker character, you know, in your mind, you're thinking Gotham City, you're thinking Batman, and you're thinking there's going to be a general way that this is going to be portrayed. You may see somewhat of a shift in Joker's character or the type of Joker that you see. And then you're going to see pretty much the same thing from Gotham City, the background, and all the other characters that'll be involved. And that's generally how a lot of the Batman or Gotham franchise series work, whether it's a TV show or whether it's a movie. But this is quite different. And I think a lot of people who saw the original Joker movie would have also realized how different that they were making this. So I say that to say that I felt like they stayed true to the fact that this Joker and the environment that he thrived in was totally different than the Joker that we have seen, or the Jokers that we've seen. So in other words, this Joker, the Arthur Fleck Joker, is a comedian, for lack of better words. Whereas we've seen different types of Jokers. We've seen an anarchist Joker. We've seen a satirical Joker. We've seen a Joker who was just a straight clown. We've seen all different types of Jokers. So this Joker was a comedian. He was like a depressed comedian, for a lack of better words. And so we got to see that in the first movie, and this was also true in the second movie. Now, I think that as a result of a lot of people feeling like, you know, things were going to be kind of similar to what we've seen from Gotham or Batman adaptation movies, I think that people were assuming that his relationship with the other characters would be kind of the same as well, too. And they were, but it just wasn't the way that people, you know, assumed. So, for example, we really didn't see Batman throughout this series. When it came to the Harley Quinn character, the relationship was a little bit different, because in the past you had it where Harley Quinn was this psychiatrist who was working with Joker, and then they fell in love, and her ass ended up being crazy too, or maybe she was always crazy and he just brought the shit out. I don't know. But the point is that, you know, I felt that this movie was making that very different, because in this case she wasn't a psychiatrist, but she was still somebody who was very interested in knowing more about the Joker and knowing more about the Joker side of Arthur Fleck. So not Arthur Fleck himself, but just the Joker. And I think that's what they were trying to focus on. To me, when it comes to hating this movie because of it being different than what you would typically expect from a DC-esque type of movie that is Gotham themed or Batman-esque themed or Joker themed, I feel like hating this movie based on it being different would be like hating the movie The Batman because it was different to a certain extent. And you know, everybody loved that movie. I actually didn't think that movie was that great. It was okay, but it was like a detective based movie versus the action packed movie that you typically see. The Joker movie, well, really both movies, if you think about it, had a similar aesthetic in the fact that it wasn't going to be so action packed so much as it was going to be more about like the themes and then the messages that they were trying to present through the character and this specific type of Joker. So a lot of people didn't like it because of that. Another thing that I think a lot of people did not like is that this movie had a lot of musical scenes. So let me tell you all my take on that and what I thought about all that. When it comes to the musical scenes, there were a lot of them, so I could actually understand why it was so annoying to everyone. I felt like there was an overabundance of musical scenes. But at the same time, I did feel that the musical having a musical scene was somewhat necessary to the plot. And what I mean by that is the musical scenes that you would see connected the Joker character to the Harley character that they were trying to create. And it was this idea that he was living in this imaginary world. And part of that was that they were singing to each other from a, I guess, poetic standpoint. And they were showing how their relationship was going to develop as he was the Joker and as she embraced this full-on Harley Quinn or Harleen Quinzel character. And so I think that they were trying to showcase that this was an important aspect within their relationship. And this came to be true at the very end of the movie. By the way, y'all, I just want to say this too before I go on. If you all do not want spoilers, just don't watch the rest of this, because I'm going to be spoiling the hell out of this movie. So if I didn't say this earlier, I'm going to be spoiling it. So anyway, I'm going to continue. So at the end of the movie, there was a point where he was trying to, as Arthur Fleck, have a relationship with the Harley character. And while he was trying to talk to her, and it was clear that she wasn't really feeling him at this point because she wasn't interested in Arthur Fleck, she was interested in the Joker, she started singing, and he didn't want her to do that. He just wanted her to have a real conversation, because at this point it had been established that there was this thing between them that they would sing together. And sometimes he would sing in his mind, and sometimes she would sing on her own as well too. And that singing is what brought the Joker character with the Harley character. But him being Arthur Fleck, he wanted to just be him. He wanted to just be a real dude, and she wasn't really feeling that. So that's kind of why I feel like it was necessary. Maybe not as much, but I think the other side of it too would be maybe if they had one musical and then she started singing in the end, people would have been like, well, why was that so significant for him to tell her to stop singing because she only did it one time, or they only had a singing thing with each other one time. Now, again, I want to make it clear that there's a portion control issue here, but ultimately there was a need to some extent, without being sublime or ridiculous, for there to be some level of musical or some form of musicals. So just to give you all a brief synopsis of this movie, just so that we're clear, I'm not going to go through it and spend tons and tons of time because I want you all to go watch it yourself and get your own opinion on what you thought happened, how you felt about it, and things like that. The movie basically was about Arthur Fleck, and now he is in prison because he killed 6 people. They know him to have only killed 5 people, but he killed 6 people, and he was locked up. They were showing how he was getting mistreated while he's in prison. Everybody wanted him to do a bunch of jokes, and they would give him cigarettes and all this other stuff. And then at some point, he meets the Harley Quinn character, or the Harleen Quinzel character, and she poses as this person who to some extent is a fan of his, and she had her own dark past and issues with her family and things like that, but she, I guess, lied about these different things, right? And so the Joker character had a lawyer, and the lawyer was trying to tell Joker, I get that you're falling in love with this chick and she's showing an interest in you and all this other stuff, but she is lying and ultimately she is no good. Then it created this conflict because, Joker had to basically take the stand because they were talking about possibly giving this dude the death penalty. So then what ended up happening was the lawyer was telling Joker, yo, you better play up the mentally ill card because that's how you're showing yourself to be, because, you having all these imagination related hallucinations and things like that. You went on a killing spree. You did all this like weird stuff. So yeah, obviously you need to be on the stand talking about you mentally ill. And so she was trying to say that. And then Harleen Quinzel at some point was trying to convince the Joker that he needed to just show everybody that he was the Joker. And the lawyer felt like going that route was just going to mess up his case. So at some point he fires the lawyer. Now, a constant theme in this whole movie was he was kissing people before he was saying goodbye to them to a certain extent, because he randomly kissed the lawyer. He kissed this other dude in prison who was a fan, and then he kissed Harley, and he ended up to some extent saying goodbye to all of these people. But anyway, so at some point he plays up this whole Joker role while he's in the courtroom. He ends up representing himself, and then at some point he's like talking to some of the witnesses who believe him to just not be acting like himself. So in other words, people are basically calling him out and saying that you ain't really mentally ill. You're just somebody who did something really stupid because you were pissed off at the way you were being treated. And you may have like a few symptoms of normal things, but ultimately you're not really, mentally ill like you're trying to make it seem. And so eventually that turned to a thing where he felt guilt, and then he wanted to come clean and tell people that he was really like just a normal dude who did something that he wasn't supposed to do. So that happened prior to there was a scene where he basically, it was suggested that he was sexually assaulted while he was in prison by these guards because he called the guards out, and he did all this other stuff while he was Joker. And then that's again what led to him basically trying to come clean about how bad he really was. At the very end of it, Harley ended up being turned off because she was obsessed with this idea of wanting to be with the Joker. And he didn't want to be Joker anymore. He wanted to be Arthur, who was able to start a new life. She wasn't really feeling it, and then she made it very clear. Then at some point, Arthur basically was back in prison. It was clear that he was basically going to get, they was going to basically off this dude. So at some point, it ended up turning into a thing where he like had a visitor, or it was said that he had a visitor. And before he went, there was the guy who was the fan, and he wanted to have the conversation with him where he was like, I got one last joke for you. And then the joke led to him basically killing Arthur Fleck in cold blood. And that's basically what ended up happening. Now, I want to get into why I believe this movie wasn't as bad as people thought, or as people are saying. One of the reasons why is because whenever I watch a movie, and I think I've told y'all this before, I have two different mindsets going. I have this mindset of I'm enjoying this movie because I'm a blurred, I'm a comic fan, and I'm a movie person. I like to watch different movies. I like to watch different TV shows. And then also the pro-black media analyst brain is also going on at the same time. So there was a point where, you know, I remembered the different allegories that I saw in the first movie, and then I started seeing similar things in this second movie as well too. So at a certain point, I turned off the side of my brain that says I'm enjoying this because I'm a comic fan, and then I turned on my brain that said I'm a pro-black media analyst, and this is an interesting thing to look at and to kind of think about and see the way that they creatively try to put this together. So a lot of people didn't like the fact that this movie, again, had a lot of musicals. The story was kind of janky, and they had all this other stuff that was going on. And I can understand that. But I think when I started looking at the allegorical piece of it, I realized that that was like their main focus. And I think that the allegorical piece of it actually really made sense to me. So what I mean by that is when you look at the allegories of this movie, it was a continuation of the first one. And I'll review the first one just so people are on track of the way I'm thinking about this. So for the first movie, what they were really trying to tell you was that they were trying to portray this trope that I would call the humanized white supremacist serial killer trope. That's when you basically have these shows and these movies where there is a white person or a tool of white supremacy, I would say, who is basically a serial killer or portrayed as a serial killer. And this individual at the same time, that throughout the series or whatever we're watching, they are portrayed as somebody who should be understood, somebody who is humanized, although they do something that is very monstrous. They do something that's very inhumane. They want the audience to see them as a human person and as a just person. And often they justify this individual's actions by making the people around them suck. They make them the worst people ever. And it's to the point where the audience sees these people be so bad and so horrible to either this main character or just in general that they don't care if this character kills off these people. So in other words, that it justifies the actions of the serial killer. And it often translates to real life when you see a lot of times that the white supremacists will kill certain people and things like that, and then they are able to get off because of what they've done, and it gets justified in some way, and they use other excuses to be able to excuse the crimes and the things that they committed. And this has actually happened time and time again. Now, with this trope, you can see this in shows such as Dexter. You can see it in shows like Hannibal. You can see it in shows like You. You can even see it in Death Note, which is an anime. So it actually even crosses over genres. So now we're looking at TV shows, we're looking at animes, and now we're looking at movies as well too. Joker also falls into this category. When you look at the first Joker movie, it had this to a T, because you had the Joker character who was essentially the humanized white supremacist serial killer. Now let's go into that. In the first movie, if you look at the Joker character was someone who became a humanized white supremacist serial killer, not because he was mentally ill, but because he believed that his white supremacy failed him. And let me explain what I mean by that. There's a lot of privileges to white supremacy. There's a lot of things that the dominant society and those in it believe that they should get as a result of being born into this system, because it has worked so many times for those who look like them. And so one of those things sometimes is being financially stable, or being able to do things to make themselves financially stable, or if they commit crimes or do bad things, that they're able to get off with it, or they get away with it, or they get a lesser sentence, or that type of thing. So there's a lot of privileges that come with the things that they choose to do, or with them basically being able to get ahead. They're able to use deception, or people are able to use deception to help them get ahead. And so the Joker realized that he didn't have none of this throughout the entire movie. So the Joker basically was treated like he was a Negro. He was treated like somebody who did not have any privileges. He had to live in a terrible area. He was getting his ass whooped when he was on the subway. He had a mom and he had a dysfunctional family. His mom was sexually abusing him and abusing him in other ways. His dad was absent. You know, he was eyeballing black women. So in his mind, he basically is saying, damn, I'm living the life of a Negro. And so because of that, he believed that it just was not fair. So his last hope was to basically go to Thomas Wayne and basically knock on that door and say, yo, I think I'm one of your kids, because my mama, she was getting around, you know, she was doing the do with whoever. So I'm one of your kids. Thomas Wayne said, no, sir, I don't want no parts of whatever you got going on. And at that point, Joker said, to hell with all this shit. And he decided to basically let everything go up in flames. And that meant that he was going to start taking people out. See, the thing about the white supremacists is when they believe that they can't get their way or they're losing control in some way, they lean on their white supremacy. So that means that somebody's got to drop. So if that means that if, you know, they're having a tussle with a black person who is giving them a minor inconvenience, then they're going to start calling the police. And that means that that black person could potentially lose their life, because you know what happens when black people deal with the police nowadays. Even if they're not doing anything, even if they're not committing any type of crime, it could possibly be a thing where they're killed with impunity. When it comes to you know, so like think about like school shooters and how a lot of them will be upset because they're being bullied like kids, and then all of a sudden they get a gun and they start picking off folks. These people are not mentally ill. Essentially, these people are just upset because they believe that they do not have control of their white supremacy, or they just don't have white supremacy at all, whether they have it or whether they don't. The Joker was one of these people. And that's why in the second movie, which is why I said there was a continuation, why in the second movie they kept trying to make it clear that, yo, this Arthur character, he's not mentally ill. He has some things that are up with him. You know, he's depressed, he's lonely, you know, he lives in this imaginary world because that's how he stays happy. But ultimately, ain't nothing really wrong with him. So this Joker thing, it's an act. So that's why they kept going on and on about that, because he really was a normal dude who just was upset that his white supremacy had failed him. Now let's talk about how this is furthered in the second movie. Although I kind of went into it a little bit, let's really get into it. So what they did in the second movie is they made it where they furthered that narrative by showing what I believe to be a blueprint of how they want the dominant society to act. So in other words, they're saying, okay, now here you are, a person who believed that you did not have white supremacy, or that your white supremacy and the privileges that come with it have failed you. So now that you've been caught up doing something nefarious, let's talk about what you can do about it. So this is a blueprint to show other white supremacist serial killers in real life what they do. And to be honest with you, I think that they were somewhat using the Kyle Rittenhouse thing as somewhat of a template. Whether that was purposeful or not, it clearly mimicked what was going on with Kyle Rittenhouse. You have this boy at the time who had basically offed a bunch of white folks, but he was doing it in an attempt to off black people. And it led to him basically using that plea of being a boy and all this other stuff, and, you know, not knowing any better as a boy and all this other stuff, in order to be able to get off. And then he became this big time star. If you look at the Joker, he has a very similar story arc that's going on, because notice that, you know, the Joker inspired people. So now it was a thing of he had an audience and he had people who were behind him, because, you know, he was, so some people thought he was mentally ill, but some people thought that, you know, he had this Joker act who was supposed to be like a second persona, as if he had some form of split personality or something. So now so what they were basically showing was that when you're a white person who was at a conundrum because you chose to off some people, now it's time to go to drastic measures. So basically, from my perspective, the lawyer and Harley were both right in how he should move to a certain extent based off of the way that the dominant society thinks. But it just was a matter of what he felt like was the best thing to do given what he had done. So in other words, the lawyer was basically telling him, yo, you need to say that you have some mental health issues, because she was able to make a strong enough argument and could have continued with it that he was mentally ill and he had a split personality. Harley was trying to say, look, just go for the full Joker angle. You are the Joker, and that is, what you are, which could have still led into the whole mental health thing. Now, the lawyer didn't feel like that was helpful. He just felt like, she just felt like Harley was using Arthur, and she was. But at the same time, it goes into this whole idea of if he played up this Joker role, it showed that there were two sides and he was showing different parts of his personality. So while some people may have thought this was an act, other people may have thought that it was legitimate, and he also showed strange behaviors that, he could go into being Arthur and Joker at times where it almost wasn't really controllable, therefore showing that he may have been mentally ill. So that's why I said to some extent they were showing that, hey, there's a couple ways that you can kind of go about this. In one way you could just do the mental health thing, and then you're basically off the hook and we can get you some quote unquote real help because you're mentally ill. Or you can go the way where you're a big star, you have a fandom, people love you, you got a split personality, so now you still get the mental health treatment, or possibly get the mental health treatment, and then you got the girl, the girl of your dreams that you think is beautiful, that you want to be with, and she's all over you, and she's thinking you the best thing smoking. Then you got followers and supporters who believe in your movement or what they perceive to be your movement. So now you have all this stuff that you could get. So you actually could get some benefits out of this. So not only may you just get off with what you've done and the fact that you've killed, 6 people, but you also may be able to come up from this. You may not even be poor when you come out of the situation. So what they showed at the same time was that if you as the Joker decide to take the moral route, that's just going to end up in you losing everything, including your damn life. So this was a warning to other white supremacist serial killers that, if you decide to take the moral high ground, it's going to be curtains. Because notice that the Joker did this thing where he was like, I'm just going to go out there and let people know that I ain't shit. And I killed them people because I was upset, because that's basically what it ended up coming down to. Because even the witnesses that were nice to him almost were working as somewhat of a conscience. So they were almost like damn Jiminy Cricket. They were, basically sitting on his shoulders being like, hey, this ain't you. You ain't mentally ill. You were the nicest person ever to me. This just shows that you were just pissed off, and you said, hey, these people got to go because they were bullies, although it was too far. And that was the problem. So he basically came clean. As a result, he lost everything. He already had gotten rid of his lawyer. He got rid of the chick who basically wasn't really for him, was only for the Joker. He wasn't really trying to rock with his supporters who were trying to do everything they could to get him off. He said, you know what? I want to be able to start a new life and start fresh. I want to just act like this didn't happen. This was just me having a rage fit. So y'all just get me up out of here and we good, and I can just live a new life and move on and move forward. And it didn't work like that. It ended up in him literally losing his life, everything, and everyone. And that's just really what it came down to. And that's how it works in real life as well, too. You may have to play this role or do this thing real quick to kind of make some things shake. But at the end of the day, if you follow through and you keep everything moving, then guess what? You'll be off in no time. People are going to forget. Time going to go by. Nobody going to think about it. And then at some point, you'll be back to being Arthur Fleck. But you just got to play the role. And because he didn't, this is what ended up happening to him. And I'm going to be honest with y'all, that's the role they try to play. And I thought that they did a great job with setting that up. But regardless of the fact that they did a great job with the allegorical piece, it has to be discussed that they still were janky with a lot of other things. Specifically, the worst thing that they did was the way that they painted Harley Quinn's character. And one of the worst things about it was that it was just really awkwardly set up. I mean, think about it. They made it seem like, her parents were rich and she was lying about that, saying that they were, that they had treated her a certain way and all this other stuff, right? But I think the idea was that they were saying that she had a certain level of privilege and a certain level of leverage. And it almost was beyond belief in some cases, and it almost didn't make sense in some cases, because first of all, she was able to break that glass and take that TV while a bunch of witnesses had watched her, and she just totally got away with it. she tried to quote unquote escape, although, you know, she had put herself in this asylum. She tried to escape with the Joker, and it was clear that they were in cahoots to a certain extent, and she didn't have no charges on her. She was able to leverage one of the security guards to get her into the same cell as Joker, which would literally never happen. And then they ended up basically having sex while they were in there. That was just beyond belief as well too. And it just ultimately seemed like, even when they were telling her story, and even the lie as well too, how much it was a lie, it just all really felt thrown together. So it was like, it almost made you feel like, they kind of threw that part together, but that was the entirety of the story. The whole story was centered around him imagining this relationship with Harley, because this whole thing was about him being in his imagination all the time in order for it to be somewhat of a safe space, because that had been the thing that had been sung to him, and the thing he had held onto as a child. Another thing that I kind of noticed about some of the things that I felt like were wrong with this movie was that I felt like it just, and my wife made this point, it was very long. Like it felt very long, at least. You know, the movie was 2 hours and I think 18 minutes or something like that, but it did feel like an eternity, and it felt like things dragged and things were a bit slow to a certain extent. And I think part of the reason why is that they did so many of these musicals. Like I said, it was an overabundance of them. And I think where they focused so much on the musicals, they could have focused a little bit more on maybe character development, because it felt like Arthur really was the same person, or just slightly like weaker, I guess. He just really didn't seem like he was much different than the guy that we saw when we were watching the first movie, or throughout the first movie. It felt like there was maybe some form of transformation maybe when we saw the first one, and then into the second one I was thinking, and I think other people were too, that there was going to be maybe a different side to him that we would see. But to a certain extent, the only thing that really even influenced him in this movie was his relationship with Harley, and being able to see that Harley was like a fan of his and wanted to have a relationship with the Joker. So I thought we would see more of that, but we really didn't. And I think that was part of the problem as well. So there were a lot of other issues when it came to the way this played out. And to be honest with you, although I'm talking about it from an allegorical standpoint, it still stands that there were many issues with the way the movie went. And I also, to a certain extent, hate when movies try to compensate for having a bad story by putting in actors who are going to do a phenomenal job because they're just good actors. So in other words, they try to lean on Joaquin, however the hell you want to say his name, Phoenix's acting skills, and then they try to lean on Lady Gaga's actress skills as well too, which both of them are great actresses, and I've seen them do a great job in a lot of other movies, like House of Gucci. Lady Gaga did a phenomenal job, you know what I mean? So I think that they were trying to lean on that, and I've seen that quite a bit in movies, and that was actually one of my issues even with the Wakanda Forever movie, is that they were leaning so much on the actors bodying their role in the movie, and they were trying to cast a veil over the fact that there were so many other issues with the film and why it was very problematic. Now, when it comes to this movie, if I had to give it a final rating based off of everything that I've seen and everything that I thought, I would probably say this movie was about a 5.5 out of 10 for me. I would mostly say that it was a little bit above mediocre. That's how my scale goes. A little bit above mediocre is because I felt like allegorically it made a lot of sense to me. And I knew the message that they were trying to convey, because there was clearly a message they were trying to convey in the first one if you were looking deep enough. But at the same time, there still has to be some level of great storytelling on top of the messages that you were trying to send. And to be real, the allegorical message wasn't something that I felt like was a good message or a valuable message for me, and certainly not for my community. But what I did think was that they still did make one, and they took the time to craft it, but they didn't allow the story to be able to flow with it as well too. So therefore, they really took a hit there for me. So I think it was bad, but not as bad as people said it was, because I think that the allegory part there was totally together. The story just wasn't as in depth, and it wasn't done as well as I would have hoped that it would have been. Now, again, I want to make it clear with this movie that I really going in didn't think that it was going to be great because of the fact that people had dogged this movie so much, right? But it still wasn't quite as bad as I think people made it out to be. It's just, there were definitely problems, but I think that we really need to take time to analyze why what we saw was key to look at to a certain extent. Hope y'all enjoyed this video. I hope you all enjoyed what I had to say. So make sure y'all stay tuned because I'll have more videos to come. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.